Hey guys, here we have the brand new Subaru BRZ. On first impressions, it does look pretty similar to the old model. You just have to look a bit closer to see the different detail changes. So different headlights, completely different, different front end. The chassis is the same, it's the same platform, it just has been revised quite a bit. Subaru also says the body rigidity has been increased by 50%, which is a massive amount. There's also been some major changes to the front end. Flexing rigidity has been increased by 60%. There's new suspension at the front to accommodate all these changes. And at the back, the track is widened by 10 millimeters. You can't really notice the extra width at the back, although you do have these little spats, I think they're called, stick out the side there. Just give it a bit more of a prominent stance, I suppose. More noticeable though is, yeah, the new tail lights. So it's got the C-shaped design there and then a trim piece that connects the two tail lights. It's not actually a full width tail light, it is just a trim piece, but it gives the impression of being a full width tail light, which is all the fashion these days. Other changes include an aluminium roof, which helps to keep the weight down, but not only down as in the curb weight, but also to keep the center of gravity down. So you want most of the car's weight to be as low as possible. That helps with handling. You don't want something that's top heavy going around corners. And then perhaps lastly is the switch to Michelin Pilot Sport 4 tires. These measure the same size, 215 by 40, mounted on a 18-inch rim on this model. But yeah, these provide heaps more grip than the previous. I think in Australia they had Michelin Primacy tyres. They're not really performance tyres. They're not, marketed as performance tyres. They're not engineered as performance tyres. They're more sort of general all-rounders, whereas these are definitely much more grippy. Which is good because this chassis can handle quite a lot. Well, after taking it for a bit of a drive, as you can see, it is a bit dirty. Sorry about that. It really does handle very, very well indeed. There is no turbo model, unfortunately. Again, a lot of fans wanted a turbo STI type model, but there is no such thing at the moment. Maybe that might change in the future, I don't know. I suspect there'll probably be a hybrid before there's going to be a turbo. But yeah, it is a brand new engine, so 2.4 litre now, more torque lower down and more top end power. So it is faster than before. I won't tell you the 0 to 100 time that we got recently, but it's definitely, I would say, significantly faster than before. And then inside, it is pretty similar to the previous model, which is probably going to be a good thing because fans of the existing model are probably going to be thinking about upgrading to this model. So everything's pretty familiar. Just start it up. So push button start. New touchscreen on the dash. I do like the fact that it's got a home button, so it brings you back to this main menu screen. Then you can go into your apps. It's not the most comprehensive media system out there, but it's and the graphics are probably a bit basic, but it does the job just fine, and it is a definite improvement over the previous touchscreen setup. Then down below you've got the toggle switches, similar to before, kind of, but these little screens with the digital readout for the temperature are a nice little touch, give it a premium look. And then you've got the heated and cooled seats in the front with the, as before, track mode, so that you can push the stability control into a track mode. And what that does is basically it'll grab on and stop you from spinning right around basically, but you can sort of get a bit of drifting going, a bit of wheel slip going, and you can also turn it completely off. The gauge cluster is fully digital now too, and you may have just noticed that when I put it into the sport mode or the track mode, the readout or the display changes to a digital rev sort of graph type counter, whereas that's more of a traditional dial. On the left screen you can change what you want to display, which is pretty cool. You can have your live tire or real-time tire pressures, saying my back rear tire is slightly lower than the rest of them. But you've also got these graphs that show you your acceleration. This one's a pretty good graph. There still is a little dip. I'm not sure if you can see that, but in the power curve, there's a little dip at about 4,000 or 3,500. Our fans might remember we did a dyno test of the previous model, and the dyno tuner said it's been engineered into the car where it has this little flat spot to save fuel and better for economy, because that's sort of where you're going to be spending a bit of the time on the highway. Whereas this, it still has that, but I can tell you, you don't feel it pretty much at all when you're driving on the road. It just free revs a bit more, whereas before you could definitely, you put your foot down and as it goes past sort of 3,000 to 4,000, you have this sort of flat spot, dead spot, and then it picks back up again. Whereas now it just sort of free spins right up to sort of 7,000 RPM, which is great. But the other big thing is the torque. So 2.4 litres, 400 cc's more sort of explosive capacity, gives you more torque lower down. So it's not as boggy when you're just cruising around, going around roundabouts and things. Again, beautiful driving position, and a lovely steering wheel as well. Leather wrapped in this case, red stitching for that sort of contrasty look. But yeah, it feels really nice. I feel quite low in the car as before, which is exactly what you want for a sporty car. I do notice the materials are a bit better in this model. There are still some scratchy bits around, but it does feel a bit more premium. Even on the top of the door skin here, it's got this sort of, it's not Alcantara, but it just feels kind of like suede, I guess. But it sort of improves the acoustics of the cabin, I think, anyway. It absorbs a bit of sound and makes it a bit less tinny. I'll go around the other side and we can check out the rear seats. Again, very tight rear seat, best left for the kids. I did have a baby seat in there, or a forward-facing sort of child seat, and my 4-year-old jumped in there. It wasn't too bad. You just have to make sure this seat doesn't go all the way back, and then that front passenger has to, you know, be a bit more forward than they might otherwise be. But I'll jump in just to show you. So you sit quite down, like you're sitting in a bucket almost, but yeah, again, make sure you don't crush your feet. You can use this to adjust it. I'm just going slowly because I don't want to bump the camera, but it's, yeah, my head is just touching that rear windscreen, and the windscreen itself is, you know, exposes your head. So some coupes, the roof keeps going, which protects you from the sun or whatever. Whereas this, it does cut off there, so you are going to be pounded by the sun on a hot summer day. You can kind of lean in, and it's not, you know, I would spend, if I had to go for a quick trip down to the pub or something like that, I would sit in here fine. I wouldn't be complaining too much, but a longer trip, definitely I'd get a bit claustrophobic. You've actually got access to the 2 cup holders from the back seat here. There's also some charging ports, dual USB by the look of it, and an auxiliary little jack there. And then in the back you have a very small boot as before. This one's got the spare tyre fitted, which does come in handy because I've got my bag in there and it stops it from moving about. But yeah, it's pretty small, you can't fit all that much in there. This is not a family car, obviously, it's a sports car, so I don't know, I can get away with it, I guess. Alright, let's go for a drive. It has been very wet here lately, so you'll have to excuse me if I slow down for some, you know, pretty minor flooding, things like that. But we'll see how we go. Hopefully it doesn't start raining either. And there's some evidence of our bad weather we've had around here lately. But yeah, the first thing you'll notice if you've driven the old model is, yeah, that pickup, that low end torque. It now wants to rev pretty easily. It's not kind of boggy, it's not a peaky engine anymore, or not as much anyway. It still loves to rev. So I'm in 3rd gear now, going up. This is a pretty steep hill. Before, if I sort of put my foot halfway down, it probably wouldn't do anything, whereas now it starts to pick up, and you've got that sort of sense of urgency there. It's a very responsive engine, definitely. And that's good. That's what you want from a naturally aspirated engine. That's one of the benefits of a naturally aspirated engine. You don't have to wait for a turbo. But yeah, this with the larger capacity, it just wants to pick up revs a bit easier than before, a fair bit easier than before. So you probably can't see it, but this is a pretty steep hill, and it just charged up that with no major dramas or no hesitation. Put it into the sport mode or the track mode, turn the air conditioning off just to make sure we're getting maximum power. The gear changes feel nice. It's a nice manual transmission. Subaru transmissions, they can be a bit notchy, the manuals I mean, whereas this, it feels pretty good. It feels nice and well oiled, or I suppose you'd call it, and it always goes into the right gear. You can flat change it from second to third, for example. And yeah, it's a nice position, nice clutch feel, good pedal placement. You can heel and toad, blip the throttle on the downshifts. It's all supportive of a driver's car. Like it's definitely built for drivers. Someone who loves driving has been behind the wheel of this car as an engineer to make sure that it fits, and it does. It's just like before, really. Heaps of grip from those new Michelin tyres. Like, I've been driving around yesterday in the full wet weather, going around some corners that I know are very slippery in the wet, and this thing, it really does hook up and grip on. If you really provoke it, it can kick out sideways. It's much easier to control now. It won't snap out and you know, surprisingly snap out, whereas now it sort of gradually snaps out, and you kind of expect it because you must be pushing it a fair bit for it to do that. And even when it is sliding, you've got control. You can still maintain the slide very easily, and bring it back to center if you want to, or when you want to. Revving. It's got a nice little note too. There is some fake sound coming through the speakers, which, you know, is a little bit annoying when manufacturers do that, in my opinion, because you just want to hear the engine. It doesn't matter if an engine's quiet, in my opinion. You just want to hear the natural noise of some mechanical device doing its thing, basically. You don't need to garnish it with something that's fake. Okay, back the other way now. This road it's a concrete road, a lot of connections, as you can probably see and hear. So it's a good road to sort of uncover any rattles and things, and to test the ride quality. There is a bit of a rattle in this door. You might be able to hear sort of like a ticking sound. And I've got nothing in the door trim or anything like that, like rubbish or coins or something. It's definitely the trim making the rattle. But the ride quality is really nice. As before, it wasn't an overly stiff car, and being so light in weight, you don't tend to need a massively stiff suspension setup to maintain body control, and that's what's happened here. The turn in is probably sort of the most impressive element, I guess. It really just wants to hook into the corners straight away, making it feel very precise. The ride quality is really really nice even over this bumpy road. For a sports car, it's definitely good for touring. The gearing is perfectly matched to this engine as well. Each gear just has the same momentum. When you grab the next gear, it just wants to keep sort of revving from that same rev range. It doesn't sort of bog down or something once you put it into fifth or anything like that. I'm in fourth now, and fourth is usually a straight through drive ratio in manual transmissions. And it's picking up fine over a bit of a crest. It revs at about 3,000 RPM on the highway. Actually, I took a photo of that the other day. I'll just flash that up. But I think it was about 3,000 on the highway, so it is a little bit high, I guess. But again, for a nimble little sports car, it's probably going to be expected. Yeah, lovely down through these tight, twisty bits. Over the road. You can really point the nose where you want it to go, which makes it a great track car. And here's this tree again. I think the best thing about this car though, and the previous model, is that it is a real driver's car. You know, they might get a bit of a bad name depending on what neighborhood you're in and depending on what country you're based. But where I'm from, you know, a lot of the young kids drive these cars, and it kind of gives them a bad name. But underneath, this is a very well engineered and a proper driver's car. You can push it really hard on roads like this, take it to a track and thrash it all day, and you're very unlikely to have any problems. Even the brakes on this thing, they're not anything special, but I've been up and down this road quite a bit. They're not fading, there's no overheating, there's nothing, there's no pedal change, no pedal feel change. It's all exactly the same. It's perfectly set up for this kind of thing. And then this new model, to me, is just a nice evolution on that. Like this, it just totally makes sense. It's supportive of all types of driving enthusiasts. If you're a pro driver, you'll love the control and the precision of it all, whereas if you're an amateur driver, you'll love that the power is not too overwhelming, but it still feels very fast, and it is quite fast, as you'll find out in our 0 to 100 video. So yeah, it fully caters for all walks of driving enthusiasts. We'll take it out onto the highway now, and I'll see how it is in terms of refinement. When it comes time to just cruising along, the BRZ becomes, or it doesn't become, it is quite a nice Grand Tourer. It's not too noisy in here. As I said, the suspension is pretty supple. The vibrations and everything are kept to a minimum, despite being a boxer engine, which is usually inherently quite imbalanced. Whereas this is, yeah, it just hums along. The engine sound is a bit more appealing than before, I think, inside the cabin. Before it sounded a bit, how can I say, like boaty, like it kind of sounded like you're in a little dinghy or something, or a little fishing boat. This doesn't have that sort of tinny sound to it. I guess the bigger capacity makes it seem, or gives it more of a beefy undertone. 100 kilometers an hour requires 2,700 or 2,800 revs. I was a bit off before. So yeah, it cruises quite nicely. Subaru does offer a automatic transmission, which we'll test as well for 0 to 100, and it's quite nice. this is a great evolutionary step on something that was already very good. If you take one of the old models for a proper thrash up a mountain road, you'll be surprised just how well it handles and hangs on. Whereas this new model is just tweaked, refined in pretty much every area. The wider track, the grippier tyres, the reinforced chassis, if you like. It just really makes it it puts it onto another level. But probably the biggest improvement is the engine. For me anyway, I like this new engine. Just a bit more pickup from lower revs. It means when you're in traffic or trying to keep up with traffic, you don't have to try so hard to keep up. And it is actually quicker, a lot quicker. So that really helps. Low end torque as well is going to be excellent on the track. You can come out of corners in third gear rather than having to change down to second. And even drifting in third gear if you want to. We'll have our full written review on the website soon, and I'll go over more of the finer details and specs. And we will of course do our 0 to 100 video for you, including a test of the automatic transmission, included in the same video. So stay tuned for that one. In the meantime, thanks for watching.